Welcome to Conscious I, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world, featuring Ravi and Savitri. Well, good morning, Ravi.
Good morning, Savitri.
We have the final session of our series, Resilience is Sacred Evolution. And I have to say that today, as I started looking at a really more, well, let's just say revisiting, because in my educational experiences, I had written quite a few research papers about burnout and possible ways to find it, address it, acknowledge it, and begin to build more resilience. So as I was looking through some of those things, I found some quizzes and some other things that I use occasionally on coaching sessions, and I realized that there were some things that maybe were happening in my world.
Yeah,
So
I
it
kind of
was,
had a sense that was the direction that was going because when you're doing that work and you're assisting others, you're not, that energy isn't focused on yourself and you realize, oh, yeah, that's me too. So I think that's a
yeah.
absolutely common, yeah, feeling.
Yeah, so there are several things that I pulled out of my files, which are great. So now I can continue to use them. You know how you have things you use for a while and then you think, oh, maybe I'll look at something different, and the other things fall by the wayside. So I'm really glad that this topic came up for us today as one of our resilience topics for sacred evolution, because thinking of it as a sacred evolution, it really is. It's as if we're addressing specific karma that comes our way, and it starts to show us what kinds of things are maybe impeding our progress, or perhaps maybe creating challenges that we may have to resolve karmically from previous lifetimes. So, looking at it from that spiritual approach gives us a different way of finding the path that helps us build resilience. We're always on our dharmic path. You know, we've said that in our previous episodes. But bringing us into a greater sense of agency so that we are able to look at and confront anything that comes our way. So, looking back at resilience, and it's been a little while since we've had that definition, it's a process of adapting well, and that little word well is huge, to difficult or challenging life experiences, be they physical, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual. And sometimes it's all of them at once, or a combination. We come into adaptation by recognizing first. So, awareness is a big thing with burnout, because a lot of times we just think, oh, I'm having a bad day, I'm exhausted, but oh, it was a long week and I had many things to do. Or maybe you had a very busy but joyful weekend and you feel tired Monday and Tuesday, and you think, so exhaustion is really one of those things we want to look at, especially if it becomes consistent or develops a
Well,
pattern.
yeah, I think that our daily lives pretty much drive um, our sympathetic nervous systems all the time. They're so activated. We're on that hyperdrive. So because that's the norm, we don't acknowledge the exhaustion and burnout because it's just I got to keep going. I got to get up and, do this daily grind if we allow our lives to go in that direction. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
easy to not notice it because it's so part of the normal.
It is. It really is. And a lot of times, and you'll see lots of literature out there, and you go out to the web and type in burnout, and you'll see that most of the information refers to the work environment. And I find that really interesting. But actually, doing a little deeper research, we find that burnout really starts maybe in a different area of our lives. And because of that, often the work environment is the place where we feel the most stress. So it's not just about stress. There's good stress that keeps us motivated and moving forward. And then there's the stress that just basically does us in. And that's the burnout stress. And so we might develop a little bit of cynicism. We feel a little more sarcastic, maybe less trustful. And that starts to show up maybe in our relationships with our significant other, with parents, with children, and our level of patience starts to shrink and lower. And then we become more cynical about all kinds of things. Maybe the choices we've made in our lives. Maybe it's about ourselves. So we turn inward and the self-judgment really starts screaming at us. So we have exhaustion, and then we layer on the cynicism. And then from there, we start seeing that even though we try harder, we're seeing our capabilities start to fray at the edges. And when that happens, then we turn inward again and start feeling guilty, like a failure maybe, which then adds more stress. So we try to work harder at whatever it is that's coming into our lives, be it the relationships, or it could be our social environment, it could be our financial situation, it could be our work environment. So I'd like to broaden the scope of burnout so that we start thinking about where is the source. So when we feel a little more ineffective, then we can bounce back to the three pillars of resilience that I brought forward a couple of weeks ago. And the first one is how we view and engage with the world. And by that, it also means how do we view and engage with ourselves. So we may be having an excellent time. We may be getting promotions in our workplace and lots of fabulous feedback. Our relationships might seem like they're on autopilot and they're a dream. It might be that our finances are stable. So all those things happen, but then what's going on? What's happening? And we have to take a look at, is our first pillar feeling a little fragile? Where's the foundation of our way of managing all that, even though it's going well? So that first pillar brings us into engaging the world and looking at our perspective and our self-worth. And this is where a lot of our practices come into being, where we go inward to meet ourselves and check in. What's the level of self, our agency, our spiritual growth, and how is that operating in our worldview for all those other things in the external world?
I think it's what's coming up. Yeah, it's important. Like that's not a real. That sounds like going internal and meeting ourselves. And it's like, well, what does that mean? And how do I do that? And this is a big thing. I don't know how. And this is just very poignantly for me coming up in the a work career realm. But I know again, like you mentioned, there's so many ways this can come up for you, relationships and whatnot. But we've talked about before, in a new career, being challenged in ways I've never been challenged before. It's very much that little microcosm of, these are all these karmic lessons you need to learn, but here's this little environment you're going to learn them in. And what I started noticing about myself is when I, face something where I have that, if I'm not sure how to do it 100% right, well, then I'm going to stress out over it and not do it, hem and haw, and be internally, all over the place, because I don't want to do it wrong. And so I never really realized that about myself, and how we do anything is how we do anything. So there are other areas that I could see that coming, out and my application of life. And really all it took was that little bit of awareness of going, oh, so that's a trigger for me. And when I start feeling that way,
Mm-hmm.
where can I go for assistance, or what can I do differently? And so it's such a small, I think, sometimes we think, oh, this has got to be some big thing and I've got to do some deep practice. The practice, what we do every day, is what helps us recognize that. But to go there is just a simple little, oh, I see myself doing that. And wow, what a huge change. So that is just, it's sometimes it feels like such a big thing, but it's that one little glimmer. And when you get it, it's big change.
And it really lands. Those glimmers have a tendency to not be really big things when the ahas
Right.
arrive, but they
Right.
hit us just the right way that we go, oh, that again, or
Right.
oh, maybe I should pay attention to that. And often we get then distracted by our external life and go forward. And for me, I have to look back at some of these things that now I'm talking with you about this morning. And we have a tendency, I know I do, have a tendency to add things to our lives. Oh, that looks so interesting. Very Rahu like, by the way. And Rahu happens to be in my ascendant. So I've lived my life that way. When something that looks fabulous or even just interesting comes my way, I say yes all the time. Yes,
Mm.
yes, let's try that. And for the most part, you know, you can plug and play and you can shift and manage and juggle and do all of that. But there's a tipping point that happens sometimes where everything seems to be fine and then suddenly it feels like, oh, maybe that was a house of cards. And for me this week, it was my older dog. And, he goes through spells of being okay at 13, soon to be 14. And then he goes through times when he isn't. And this week was one of those. And I had the air conditioning people come, and the lawn came, and there were all kinds of things that were not usual routine that I realized, boy, it's really a good idea that I'm looking at burnout again and starting to do some self assessments. And I took some of my own quizzes and I looked at them and I thought, okay, let's take a deep breath and look at what's doable. And actually, nothing changed. All those things happened, but my worldview shifted. And I thought, I have plenty of time to do all these things. I do. I just need to be able to not panic about them and
Right.
not do that internal stressor. Oh no, I have this coming. Oh no, I have that. Oh no, that happened. Great. And then that helped me dive in and to check in and see, well, what's my resilience bank look like right now? And I realized that there was some in there. So I drew it out and the next thing I knew, with a little pranayama and a few moments that maybe I thought I couldn't afford to spend, but I decided to do it anyway. And things shifted for me.
Yeah.
And I realized I have lots of social supports. That's pillar two. Lots of people that I can just take a moment and send off a quick message or maybe meet with or have a conversation. And even though that also takes time, afterwards it erases so
Yeah.
much of the
Yeah.
anxiety.
See, those moments that you take, that, like you said, those moments you take where you feel like you don't have, those, to me, those become, they're portals, because
Mm-hmm.
they shift
Oh,
time. They really do. It's amazing. And there are times, not to be too crazy, but there are times I've done that before, Like I just, I have this, that, and the other thing to do, and it's all on my mind at once. And if I think about it, I almost get ragey because I'm just like, how am I going to get it all done? I don't have time to go take the cat out for a walk or whatever it may be. And I do it because I know that if I don't, I'm going to explode. And all of a sudden, it's this portal opens. And there have been times when I've looked at the clock and I'm like, surely more time has passed than that. I truly think it opens magical portals when we allow our nervous system to relax and allow that shift to occur by keeping the nervous system calm. And it's such a huge change. But there have been times when I'm like, no way is that
Right.
time correct.
It feels impossible. Yes, I know those
Exactly.
moments. And then you
Yeah.
realize we really are in charge with our life. And if I'm 10 or 15 minutes late for something, I'm late. I just let
Right.
people know, and then I'm there. And then that 15 minutes might have been just enough to take the edge off. And it's
Well, for
interesting.
me too, it's sometimes it's how much time have I spent sitting in the worry also that's taking that time away.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So um, that can be a time eater, a gobbler. Um,
Yeah.
having and in Vedic astrology we say um, the future represents anxiety,
Mm.
and the past can represent depression. So you can get stuck in either one. And again, it comes back to what we talk about a lot, which is coming to the present moment. And so a lot of this resides in our bodies. So if I have a stressful day that is, let's just say it, maybe a little bit of burnout, maybe a lot of burnout, how am I going to recover? And I might wake up the next day and feel really uncomfortable in my body because my body has held the tension, has held the stress. And so there may be certain areas of my body that feel um, uncomfortable or maybe even painful. And that's when I personally go to somatic practices. And I have a tendency some days to come into class and say, okay, everybody, today it's going to be a little bit about me and all of you. But I have some things that are showing up for me. So let's try them out and see how they work for everyone. And with that, I'm able to start bringing the body into more comfort. And during that time, and maybe some of you have found this to happen in your lives, where maybe you go out and you run, maybe you go spend time with nature, maybe you go on a vacation, maybe you take a day off. I just love that there are some places now that offer mental health days where you get a certain couple of days where you could call in and say, I need a mental health day. And it's perfectly legit. It's not one of your sick days. It's a day where you can just know that you need some time to relax. So, what's all this come to? Boundaries. And again, you can go out there and look, and everywhere you look, it seems like that is the silver bullet for helping with burnout. But I'll have to say, it's not a silver bullet. It's something that we bring our worldview to the perspective of needing to maybe organize our time differently, maybe to come into a more restorative way or calming way of responding to some of the things that are external to us. And maybe it means coming into confrontation with some things that have been hidden or held and are causing more internal stress because we perseverate around them and about them when we are alone. And that's what you were talking about when you said the time that it takes to feel anxiety about something or discomfort.
Yeah, the how long you sit in that. I know I can get stuck in a loop of sitting, um, you know, or in the mind of, you know, what do I get started on first? So then you don't get started, and time slips away. Whereas if I just allow myself those moments of coming back to now, coming back to center, being grounded, relax, let my nervous system relax, be out in nature, take some breaths, and come back. And everything, I can do a little bit here and a little bit there, and the aggregate just, all of it is like, oh. And there are times where no, you're not going to get it all done. I'm not going to get it all done, but I've gotten enough done that I can relax into my space and know that it will get done. And that sometimes comes into the space of self-compassion, where you have to just give yourself grace and know that you're doing what you can. And so that can be a incremental practice with, as we learn to give ourselves grace and adjust to, learning how to treat yourself better and to give yourself time to decompress is a process in and of itself, giving yourself permission. I've worked with folks before, if you're privileged, so, having those mental health days to take, that's a privilege.
It is
And
a
I know
privilege.
a lot of folks are in positions where it can feel like there's no way out. I've worked with folks and I'm friends with folks whose lives are very different from mine. They have different pressures. They have different, familial family needs, and their work life is different. But I very often find, no matter what, it's that feeling of there's no way out. But that you go back to those pillars. What supports do you have? And sometimes you're not giving yourself permission to ask for the supports or to ask for the help or to do something different that might create that little bit more space. And it's not to victim blame, but just to say, take another look and give yourself permission to open space for that, for yourself. Because sometimes you're the only person who can give it to yourself. Maybe your work doesn't give it to you, or it seems like my family isn't there for me, or I don't have that kind of support. Where do you have that support, or where can you carve out that support? How can you shift your worldview? So, it's the sometimes we have to give ourselves permission.
Yeah, and you just beautifully summarized the third pillar, which are coping strategies. And boundaries is one of them. But there's
Yeah.
a lot, people say, how do I set boundaries? Well, it's a lot to set a boundary when there hasn't been one with a particular
Yeah,
area of your
it's
life in the
huge.
past.
It comes with all kinds of, you may lose, that may shift your life entirely. And yeah,
Yes.
there's so much that comes with boundaries. It's yeah.
Yeah, and especially if it's something that has been internal for a while, like especially in a work environment where you may have been there for a long duration and it has been just boiling, simmering, then it boils every once in a while, then it simmers, and then you realize that there needs to be some type of boundary set to not take on all the projects that are offered, maybe to have some dialogue around the project and how it impacts the other things that you're doing in that work environment, and allow the individual to start seeing the um, the situation and the ability for you to have time management strategies that allow you to be successful in everything. So begin to use
I
that
mean,
relationship. Yeah.
in relationships, family relationships,
Yes.
or intimate, in friendships, intimate relationships. Boundaries, especially now that your relationships may be shifting. And if something keeps coming up and coming up, it may be time to ask, is it time to set a boundary so that I feel, I can create safety and I can create space for my nervous system to relax, for my body to feel safe, and my mind and my emotions to be in a safe place, and build that resilience. Because that's how we build resilience, not from a space of
Yes.
fear where we have tunnel vision. But from that space, that's why, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and, even our chakra system, it starts at our root and our support. Are we supported? We have shelter and food and water, all that's under attack. So, it's getting ourselves into that space where we have the ability to grow and to come into that just letting go so that we're not acting from a place of fear and having that tunnel vision where we're looking at just what we need to do to survive this moment, but where we can actually step back and open up into that broader perspective of where we can thrive. And that's coming, from a place of where our needs are met, safety, and we, feel safe in our bodies and our emotions and our minds.
So we can talk a little more about some boundary setting because I think that's something that is so individual and personal that it shows up a lot in some of the coaching sessions that I do with people. And I'm sure you have that happen as well, where we start looking at where boundaries might be a good way to start practicing a little bit more self-care, if that's where we are,
Yeah.
which then leads to maybe a little bit of burnout avoidance, or at least um, slow down the process. But I want to mention what we just talked about, sort of summarize it real quickly, and then go into the boundary thing if you're okay with that. Um, there are key moments, things that we want to look at if you are experiencing burnout, because burnout, although it's something that everyone talks about, and oh, I feel so burnt out today, or this is going to burn me up and I'm going to do it anyway, and burnout can be joyful, like I said, or it can be stressful in a way. Although joy is stress too, it can be negative as well as joyful. So if you're feeling chronic fatigue, and by chronic that means that it shows up on a regular basis, and you find yourself in circumstances where all of a sudden you feel like you're slightly dragging yourself through something, or maybe you would prefer to find a reason for not, be aware of that. It's not the only thing, and it can be just a short-term thing. It can be a product of having a lot of things show up at one time, and some of them are going to have their own life cycle and move on. So you know that, oh, this is a busy time, but I have open space coming. So if you have that kind of balance in your life, chronic fatigue may not be the best indicator if you're headed for burnout. But that, coupled with irritability, where things that never bothered you before start to show up, and your patience feels a little thin, and you start moving from being patient into tolerant, and tolerant sometimes then explodes into other emotions. It might be you just feel like sitting and crying, or you might have anger. So there might be great sadness, there might be grief, and some of this can show up for other reasons, but it's all part of what's going on in that first pillar, which is our worldview. And then loss of motivation. So what's happening? Maybe you used to love to go to work every day. Maybe you used to look forward to date nights with your significant other, or just meeting up and doing something fun spontaneously, and it doesn't feel comfortable. Not that you don't want to do it, it just feels like so much. And you find yourself thinking, do I really have time for this? And if I have time for it, do I have the energy for it? This isn't an indicator about a relationship or whether you should stay at your job. It's an indicator about what's going on in your worldview that's bringing you into these responses. And then the physical body, and I mentioned that, and bringing some physical relief into the body. And there are lots of ways you can set boundaries around your schedule and around all the activities that you have in your life, including relationships. And then another key indicator is isolation. Do you feel like you just need to get away? Turn everything off, not touch base with anyone, just find some time. Well, maybe that is a healthy response. Maybe a meditation retreat or telling people, hey, I need a few hours on so and so date, and don't worry, I'm going to be gone, not available, but I'm just going to spend some time building some resilience. So those are
Well,
the indicators.
I think that the thing about those indicators is, and to be aware, well, one, if you're having chronic fatigue, check it out. Go see a doctor. Go because that's important. Your physical health, I think, is something that we often ignore because healthcare is expensive and it's, we'd rather ignore it. And I think another reason is if there is something going on health wise and it's something chronic, it comes on so slowly and you start
Exactly.
losing things so incrementally that you may not notice. So
Mhm.
really, and it may feel, it's one of those things that may feel normal to you. So I'm just fatigued all the time and all I can do is just make dinner and lie down on the couch and then I'm so tired. What's going on? Go check it out. Because I think, we kind of tell ourselves in our brain, it's normal, I'm just tired, I am burnt out. But if there's a physical issue, I think that, and at least for me, there's oh, this is just how it is, it's just normal. And then it turns out you have Hashimoto's, haha, or something else,
Mhm.
and you could be on medication and feeling much better. So there is that aspect, especially with your physical things. Check it out because even if it is something energetic that when we can get there, we deal with the gross first, right? Our bodies
Mhm.
come
Mhm.
first. We have to get those in place because sometimes realigning that can get us
Yeah, it's a big
boundaries.
one.
And I think the other I think a lot of people the argument we always have is just there's no space for it, right? Yeah but I
Of
can do
course.
that, but I don't. This is the one thing I can't. There is no. If there were time, if there were space, I would do it, wouldn't I? Of course I would. And I think that's that world shift, or I'm sorry, that perspective shift has to come first. Like I care about myself enough to give myself this time, or I'm going to allow myself this space, and I am going to ask a friend for help. Or sometimes we really have to take a bigger look at our lives and where is my community? Why don't I have community? What am I not allowing into my life that could be a support for me? So,
Mhm.
all those different pillars, we come back to them. If they were easy, we'd all be doing it. And the reason it's not always easy is because we're not always seeing ourselves that clearly, or we're not giving ourselves permission to move in this area of life. And there's, it's not just do I have the time on my work schedule, it's do I have the courage, or do I have the do I have the ability to make mistakes, or have the courage to make mistakes and move forward and ask for help when I need it? That's the deeper question.
It is.
So
Mhm.
it's, we can all look at like, oh, these surface level things of what's going on in life that we're all dealing with. If we're all, if it were easy, we'd all be doing it and just like, woo, life is fun. So, and we all deal with it differently. Your fix, your solution to your problem isn't going to be the same as mine.
Exactly. It's all very individual. Yeah, I agree with
Right.
that.
So I think that's a huge topic that absolutely we could. I want to kind of just as a note put that down for something to circle back to in depth, because again, it's highly personalized, and we're at a time in life, or I think socially, socio-politically, at a place where how do we create boundaries that protect our energy as we move through the world, but also still allow things to come in. How do we create boundaries without blocking flow? Would be something I'd be interested in exploring more deeply.
I agree with that. I think boundaries would be a great topic where we could take an entire episode or even more
Oh
and
yeah,
start
for
looking
sure.
at
Like a
boundaries.
whole series, right, on that
Yeah.
because that's oh, there's a lot around that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really the critical thing to be able to do because that's where the work is. And that's where often, and I find myself doing this. You talked about the physical things that show up and how we should check in with the doctor. And I agree with that. Sometimes, though, intuitively, we get certain things that happen in our body. Like suddenly we get um, a nervous or upset stomach when we think about
Mm-hmm.
something or know we're supposed to be doing. Supposed to is one of those things, like should, but those things that are in our life that we've committed to. Or we may start feeling kind of sweaty or even clammy and
Mm-hmm.
cold, or
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe we have jaw pain because we've been clenching our teeth, not only during the day, but we wake up in the morning and we've been clenching the teeth all night long. And we feel that, I mentioned earlier, tense muscles in our body in different places where everything seems to be shrinking in and just causing discomfort. Uh, so the boundary setting is so individual for each of us, all of you as listeners. It's also individual based on where those boundaries need to be put in place. There are different boundaries having to do with work versus relationships versus what we choose to do for ourselves. And I started just a minute ago saying, yes, I can put all the boundaries in the world in. I can go through my schedule. It's August 1st. I'm looking at August. I'm Xing out places where I want to have breathing time or just whatever shows up time, resilience building time. And then I look back at July and I look at all those places I did that July 1st and I see appointments
Mm-hmm.
and I see things that I put in there. And then when I look at the actual amount of time, the number of days that I blocked off a few hours for this or that just for me, hmm, let's just say I wasn't completely honest with myself as far as holding my boundaries in place. And there was always a good reason, right? So we can have that type of thing show up where we say, okay, just this once I'm going to do it, just this once. And before you know it, just this once has dissolved any boundaries that may have been put in place. So there's a commitment strategy also that goes along with setting boundaries. And again, it's about resilience for sacred evolution. And the evolution is to be able to hold yourself in authenticity and feel the dharma that you have in this lifetime as whole, complete, and satisfying. And boundaries is just one thing.
Yeah, as far as the coping mechanisms, especially that lead to resilience and prevent burnout, yeah, it's a big one. That's one I think would be great to, do a deep dive on. Um, but, so many others, emotional regulation, recognizing the emotions that do come up for us, or like you mentioned, the feelings, like when I get that feeling in my gut and I'm all, ugh, okay, well, where does that go to? Or when I'm feeling resentful that I'm doing something, um, and I'm feeling resentful towards a person or a situation, where could I have, where do I need to rewind and take myself back to do something differently so that doesn't come up or that doesn't manifest? Or is that a feeling that I can shift in this moment by accepting, something and moving forward differently? Um, those are our signals, and we can suppress them and ignore them or sick, or we can acknowledge them and sit with them long enough to really get I think in our culture we tend to you know suppress or avoid a lot of those the what we may think of as negative emotions or negative feelings, but they're just, if we can sit back and like it. There's oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget. He does the Quiet Mind podcast, and I really enjoy his work. He has said this, and it sticks with me. But just like all things, all things are made of a positive, negative, and neutral,
Hmm.
energy potential. And so when we can sit back and, instead of saying this is a negative feeling or this is a negative emotion, just kind of observe it and recognize that it has positive, negative, neutral potential. So we sit with it long enough, and we allow it to guide us in a different direction. Then we resolve that feeling or emotion or whatever vibration, and we're in a different place. So they're signals, right? If there's a dissonant frequency, if our TV, well, I'm going back to the dating myself to these young kids aren't going to know what I'm talking about. But we used to have to move the rabbit ears on the TV to get a better reception. When you want something to be clear, you have to be like, okay, well, where do I need to go? What do I need to do to get better reception, to be in better attunement with this frequency? So it's a process,
It
always
is.
something to be gentle with yourself through, because um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And,
it's
mantras are uh, really powerful for me personally. Uh, and they don't have to be mantras that are Sanskrit. And although that's what I have a tendency to use most of the time, but mantras are really power statements. They are ways to come into self awareness. So you might have a mantra that's just as simple as I am safe, I am aware, I feel joyful. And even though you may not at that moment, and everyone will choose their own words, the brain hears everything we think and say. And so bringing some of that back to ourselves is a way to start looking at the self-awareness, because that's what you mentioned. You were mentioning, becoming aware. And we talk about that. That's a phrase that you and I use a lot. Become aware, become aware. And then maybe that's a topic as well as boundary setting. You know, how do we
yeah.
do that? Because there's so many boundaries there, and there are ways that we don't see ourselves clearly. And we're not about to go out and ask everyone, well, what do you think when I do this? Or what do you think when I say that? To try to get feedback, because that's not real about how we might do things. But, in some ways, that's the kind of thing that we're looking at when we ask ourselves those questions. And the detachment that you mentioned, the way to be able to just observe both ends of the continuum and understand what all the consequences that we can possibly imagine
Right.
might
And
be,
everywhere in between,
and
and
everywhere in
choose
between.
yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, sounds like we dug up a new topic or two at least today.
Yeah.
And
We'll have to circle back to some of those.
yeah, and I am so grateful for our series on resilience is sacred evolution. And I'm looking forward to hearing comments. I'm sure you are too. We would love to hear from all of you.
Right, we didn't say that up top, really. I mean, I know we mentioned it, but right. So if this is your first time you're catching that, it's our four-part episode, and you can go back and listen to the other three episodes. So thank you for joining us here today, and we'll be back with a new topic next week.
And please like, share, and subscribe. It's free to subscribe. We do not have a paywall. It just gives you the opportunity that um, when we drop our episodes, you get notified, so you know they're out there, and you can go and listen at your convenience. There are lots of different people that have come back and said, I'm listening while I cook, or I, plug my earbuds in and I listen while I clean, and it seems to go so much faster. not the podcast, but the task that they're doing. And that gardening, driving, we're here for you. And we look forward to spending some more time with you as well as we approach our 1 year anniversary. So,
Yeah. So thanks for being here, Satnam.
namaste.